Well, hello there, friends and kin. Welcome to episode 2 of the Gnostic Ministry of the Green. In this episode, I thought I'd talk a little bit more about my background and, well, how I got to where I am. It's how all good conversations start, right? We get to know where we've been, get a little bit more of an understanding of where we are, and and from there get a little bit better of an idea of where we're going. And as usual, I'm gonna fire up one of these dusky beauties and smoke on while we talk. This particular cigar is an H. Upman Vintage Cameroon. These bad boys are cedar wrapped, and I used to work in the cigar industry. That's kind of where my passion started. And I see a lot of these fancy packaged cigars that are cedar wrapped, and I've always asked what the logic was behind that. And reps have told me anything and everything from it helps protect the outer wrapper leaf of the cigar. Honestly, I think they just do it because it looks fancy. Kind of same reason they put them in tubes. But either way, that comes right off. So, where did I get started? Not with cigars, but with this witchcraft business, this occultism, this alternative spirituality. There's so many names for it. You pick any one of them, and they're all applicable in their own way. And pardon me, sometimes it takes a while to get a cigar properly lit. So, whenever I've been to groups in the past where people introduce themselves and go into their background, there's typically always a discussion of finding a book in your teenage years. And for a lot of folks my age and maybe just a little older, a little younger, somewhere in my age group, which, just for the record, at the time of making this video, I am 42 years old. I was born in 1983. And so anybody born in those late 70s through the mid 80s, a lot of us, our first resource for picking up this kind of stuff was Scott Cunningham. And I still have his books in my library, and he's been trashed by one group or another for a multitude of different reasons. A lot of people accuse him of giving birth to the white fluffy bunny flavor of witchcraft, and a lot of people that are in the traditional folkloric that operate under those labels, folkloric and traditional witchcraft, they tend to not have as positive of a perspective on Scott. I'm different in that regard. Just because somebody sees things a different way as me doesn't mean I think they're full of garbage. And I feel like Scott Cunningham had one hell of a publishing career, and he's responsible for waking a lot of people up to the idea of a nature centered spirituality, whether it was authentic witchcraft, which, really, what does that even mean? In my opinion, if your witchcraft works, it's authentic, and that's really all that matters. The proof is in the pudding, and if it works, then it's authentic. But Scott Cunningham published quite a few books in his lifetime, and if you bother to read his bibliographies, his sources are about as legitimate as they could be under the circumstances. There are some that are questionable, not because the authors intentionally misled people, but because some of their assumptions and assertions we later found out to be slightly off. One good example of this is Margaret Murray. Margaret Murray's theory that there was some mass organized pagan cult, and that was the source behind the the witchcraft crazes of the Middle Ages all the way through the colonial period. Most of academia is pretty certain that that didn't happen, but when her works were published, a lot of people actually took her at face value, and even as some people started to question her work, there were some that stood by it and accepted it as fact. Now, as to whether or not Scott Cunningham accepted those works as fact, I don't really know. Sadly, he's not around to ask that question to anymore. But either way, Mr. Cunningham cites other sources that are legitimate in the magical lineage, such as the three books on occult philosophy, like Agrippa or by Agrippa. So there's a lot of sources cited from the medieval grimoire tradition. A lot of our stuff comes from that. So I tend to view him through a bit of a softer lens, and I'm also rather grateful for him. Being my introduction to the craft, he kind of helped me wrap my head around a lot of things that helped me at the point in life in which I found him. And I am grateful for that. Even if I no longer consider myself a Wiccan, uh, I do appreciate what his work did for me at the time I found it. So that being said, my journey did start there, and I derail sometimes, and I beg your indulgence. Please bear with me. I promise you, no matter how far the train gets off the track, I will bring it back somewhere down the line. Curses of ADHD. Uh, Struggled with that since I was a teenager too. But so when people start these discussions, they're like, well, like all of us, I picked up Scott Cunningham or Ray Buckland or Raven Grimazi, any of these authors that have been around a while. Anne Mora is another big one. Her Green Witchcraft series. I ended up at some point in my life having all the above, and reading from all the above and incorporating elements of all the above. So when we start these conversations and we start throwing out those names and everybody kind of gets on the same page, like, yep, I picked that one up too, read that one too, utilized that one too. But there's another part of that conversation that a lot of people are a little bit more hesitant to get into. So that may be where your path formally started. Where did it really start? What made you want to pick up those books to begin with? That that is usually a question that has far more interesting answers. Now, sometimes it goes rather personal, goes to really personal places, and sometimes people are not always comfortable sharing that up front, and that's okay. If you feel like you've ever been pushed to share that information, uh, uh, that was a wrong done to you. Nobody should ever be forced to share that stuff if they don't feel comfortable doing it, because it's often deeply personal, and sometimes it involves experiences that scared us, or that we might even still have lingering trauma from. And so whenever it comes up in discussion, there's never anything wrong with saying, I'm not comfortable talking about that right now. Maybe somewhere down the line. Me personally, I'm not gonna share every last bit of it right now, but as these discussions proceed, I'd like to, if for no other reason than just to let other people who've had similar experiences know that they're not alone, and that always helps. There's always comfort found in that, at least I think. But I'll share a couple of those ideas right now as we're sitting here getting to know each other. I When I was a child, I was just innately drawn to things outside the box. I was like that, I think, from the time I was old enough to crawl around and investigate things with my hands. There were two things. I liked being outside of where I was supposed to be. I liked understanding and I liked understanding how things worked. I wanted to understand what made everything tick. And that served me well in a multitude of areas of life as I got older, several different career paths. Where I live, York, South Carolina, it is hotter than blazes here right now. Uh, but so you will see me chugging water. So pardon me for that. Staying hydrated keeps me alive, I've come to discover. So being drawn to everything outside the box, did a lot of walking and wandering in the woods when I was a kid. And I remember feeling like I remember feeling like everything was alive. I remember feeling like I remember feeling like I wasn't alone out there. Sometimes that feeling was terrifying, uh, especially to a child around the ages of 6 or 7. But then there were times I felt comforted, and I could laugh and I could play, and I felt like I wasn't alone. And in those times, it wasn't creepy and it wasn't scary. I as a kid, I struggled connecting to other children, and I felt connected in those moments. And I could always tell a distinct difference. When I felt like I wasn't alone and I had this playful feeling in my heart, I knew everything was okay. But then there were times I could feel like something was angry, and something didn't want me there. Those times scared me. But I usually left when I had that feeling. Didn't quite understand what any of that meant at that age. And, my family always said, well, you just have an overactive imagination. Told that all my life. Overactive imagination. You should write stories. You'd be good at it. You're creative. And I did some of that later on in life. I did have a few paranormal experiences at a young age that scared the ever loving bejesus out of me. And I might do some episodes down the line that dive into those experiences specifically, but because there's a little bit more to them than I want to get into in this video. Uh, but yeah, they were there, and yeah, they traumatized me. I had officially it was called night terrors, and they haunted me most all of my childhood up until I was maybe about 9 or 10 when it finally stopped, and and they really haven't been an issue for me since, except for graphic, vivid dreams. It's what they evolved into. They stopped being scary all the time, and some of them are actually fun. Some of them are actually rather pleasant. And I still have those to this day. That stuck with me. But all of these experiences together left me with this feeling that there was something more to the world than what I could see with my normal conscious vision, something more than what was told to me in church, something more than what family and teachers taught me about. And I think I was about maybe 10 or 11 the first time I went to a library, and I started seeing books on witchcraft and occultism, and I started being exposed to different ideas of divinity and different ideas of spirituality, and I didn't quite understand what any of that really meant at the time. uh, some of you around my age, a little older, will probably remember these. Time Life had this series of books. They were all black bound, and I forget what they were called, but if somebody knows, please let me know in the comments, because I'd love to try to find them again. But they had it covered anything from UFOs to cryptids to witchcraft and mysticism, and I remember just diving into that stuff. I was so attracted to it, so drawn to it, and I remember there were a couple of other books on witchcraft, though they were never from a practical standpoint. It was usually more the history of, or academic investigations into that sort of thing. It was never, something like an operator's manual. It was more of a diagnostic. If we want to, that's a good analogy for it. But there were ideas in those books that seemed to help me look back over the weird crap that happened to me and kind of make sense of it. Uh, and then that would progress to eventually finding my first few books on witchcraft. And I was 16 years old when I found this self dedication ritual. I found it online of all places because this was during the birth time of the internet, and boy was it the Wild West back then. Wow. Uh, Before MySpace, before Facebook, before YouTube, I found all these different amateur websites of people that practice different flavors of witchcraft or occultism, and a lot of them did have self dedication rituals, and I looked through several, found one I liked. A couple of them were given to me by friends, and one of the ones given to me by friends became by one of my friends became the sort of the foundation that I built off of. But I did this ritual in my closet. That year there were two full moons in the month of October, and I did this at the new moon in between them, and that was the official start of my path. But I'm going to backtrack a second here. Usually, it's those childhood experiences where we have this feeling that we're different from other kids. We see things they don't see, feel things they don't feel, hear things they don't hear. It's usually those experiences that really mark the start of our path. Uh, the books we find, the more formal initiations and self dedications we do, those are secondary, at least in my opinion. They come later in life once we start finding our way to ideas and practices that help us make sense of those things that happened in our childhood. And so that's where I'm going to end this video, with just that idea of where'd your path really start. And look beyond the teenage years where you started buying books and experimenting with that kind of thing. What experiences made you curious, even want to pick up those books to begin with? Again, that's usually where our personal stories really begin. So we'll talk more about that as these conversations go on. It was good seeing you, good talking to you. I look forward to talking to you more as time goes on. Have a wonderful day.